Thanks, councillors. Let's make a start. It's just on 6 o'clock. Councillors, we're now recording. Councillors, it's 6 o'clock on Thursday evening, the 20th of May 2021. Obviously, welcome to you all. I declare the special council meeting of this evening open. We start by acknowledging the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land. We also pay our respects to elders, both past and present. Again, can I just ask everyone to turn off electronic devices? Councillors, can I make sure, please, all mobile devices, including your phones, are switched off? Tonight's council meeting is being recorded, the special council meeting, and an audio of the recording will be available on the city's website within 72 hours. And the remainder of the disclaimer is on the screen. Apologies, Councillor Sarah Sabiri is unable to be with us this evening and did provide notice. Thank you to her. Approved leave of absence, there are none. Disclosures of interest, governance, I believe there are none. Is that right? At disclosures of interest at item 3, there are none. Public question time at item 4. For the record, there are no members of the public present, so I will not open or close a public question time. We move on to item 5. Item 5, 5.1 petitions, there are none. 5.2 presentations, there are none. And 5.3 deputations, there are none. Councillors, tonight we only have one report on the agenda at item 6. It's item 6.1 on this evening's agenda. The responsible officer is Director Stephen Kane, the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial. The item is CC 020 of 21. The title of that report being Proposed Differential Rating 2021-2022. The recommendation is on screen and is also on page 4 of tonight's special council meeting agenda. Can I have a mover, please, for that item? A mover, councillors, from the floor. Councillor Holland, thank you very much. Seconder, please. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Holland, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm in favour of this. In support of this, I think we've gone through the differential rating. We've had it for how many years have we had this? 3 years. 3 years. This is the 3rd year. And the logic behind it, I'm quite supportive of. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't think I have to go on a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Deputy Mayor Jacobs.
No, just to say that we've moved this for a reason, and it's been our 3rd year. And when we examined the benefits, I was happy to move to this system. So for consistency, I think that best that we keep it at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have anyone wishing to ask a question or speak against the matter? Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a number of questions, if you don't mind, because this was pretty much
go ahead.
Short notice. And I'll go through them page to page. If they can't be answered, I'll accept they're taken on notice. But
thank you.
I would ask them, if the directors, if they can, please do.
Yes, go ahead.
On page 3, it says the operating and deficit budget. Now, I mean, my understanding, I'll ask this through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Kane, if that's correct. So basically what we're saying here is that you have to earn more than you're spending. That I believe is correct. And the other question is, I'm just thinking, depreciation. Is depreciation an internal part of the budget allocation, or is it a separate section on its own and possibly governed by surplus funds and or unspent capital funding from the current
Director
budget?
Kane.
That's the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Depreciation is an expense. It's taken up as a non-cash item in the first part of the budget, then added back to the budget. So we allow for depreciation as an expense. It's not cash back. That's one of the reasons we have the deficit this year, but it comes back in terms of the Capital Works Renewal Program.
Is it part of?
Just your microphone. Can I get you to repeat that, please?
Yes, it's part of the budget process.
It is part of the budget?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just in relation to our new rates in the dollar, I mean, I did my calculations, they may be wrong, but I've worked out that residential is going to go up 3.75%, is that correct?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you go back to the last item we took you to the long-term financial plan, and option 2. It broke down the two components of the movement in the rate. One relates to the removal of the concession payment. The other one relates to the general increase in rate. So that's broken down. I think it's in attachment 7. I'll have to just check for a minute, Mr. Mayor.
I might say, just to hurry it up a little bit, I mean, what I did was take the last rate in the dollars as opposed to this year's possible differential rates and added what the percentage might be. I've come up with 3.75 for residential, 7.5 up for non-residential, and a bit over 15% for unimproved land. I'm just wondering whether that is correct or not.
So that's probably not correct. I don't think the numbers you're quoting are certainly not consistent with the item. If I could note that where are we? The general movement of the residential rate without the concession component goes up 2.1.7%, but then you add the concession removal on that as a separate component. As I said, the commercial moves up 4.5%. The vacant land rate maybe, and I have to get Mr. Atawala to come back and confirm it about that percentage you mentioned. Yeah, because it's moving from the previous level of uplift, which is 142%, which we have adopted in the current year, back to what has been the long-term average for the city of 160%.
Okay. On page 7, it says residential improvement, and it includes all multi-units, duplex dwellings, and Department of Community Improved Properties. Is that just the government pay rates, or because I'm pretty sure that Department of Communities, through not-for-profits who take over their properties, they don't pay rates.
Director Kane.
Department of Communities pay
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This covers the properties that are owned specifically by the Department of Communities where they give us a rate check. If a property is owned by a not-for-profit agency, independent of that, they can apply for rates exemption, as in all not-for-profits charitable status.
Yeah. One other, sorry, I missed it on page 6, and I mean, it talks about that, I think it was a $10 million deficit, and I think I asked this once before.
Can I just ask which paragraph you're referring to? There's a number in the left column.
Page 6,
Yeah, which number in the left column there, the paragraph number?
6.
6, okay, yep.
And it talks about the decade of operating deficits, which I think you said come to about 10 point something million. I'm just wondering, like I said, I asked before, and we together didn't get a breakdown because, and the question I asked that because I'm just wondering if we can add the dollars up, we must know what the items were. Is that a fair assumption?
I'm not quite sure which items you're asking us to add up. So the 10.5 million related to the mid-year budget review, which we took recently. And as you know, in that mid-year budget review, it included extraordinary items such as the underground power project, which we paid for in advance, but we recouped next year. It included things such as the $800,000 related to non-recovery at that time of overheads. So are you referring, the questions you seem to be asking aren't related to this particular item in this budget? I'm just struggling.
Okay, so, well, the budget relates to operating deficits, as it says in here, over 10 years. Yeah. Do you have the figures for those?
So the operating deficits for the 10 years were included in the long-term financial plan review, which we took to you last month. And specifically, I can tell you they are shown in attachment...
It doesn't matter, maybe you could show me after, just so I can...
Attachment 1.
Expedite the process. Yep. Now, on 27, on page 9, it talks about interim rates have been around 225, though a considerable variation of matching different economic cycles. The estimated value of interim rates for 2021-2, I assume that's the same property as $255,000. Have you got it? Just so.
Director Kane.
Thank you. No, these are the properties that have had an uplift during the year. So with the interim rates, they are, excuse me, there are properties which are now going from a higher value to a new value as a result of the change. Most of them come from newly created properties in the city centre. So where we, for instance, had a lot that a year ago might have had nothing on it, a year on it's got 40 new residential apartments, they all come under the interim rates.
So is that our view or our interpretation of the rise, or is that the GRV, because the GRV is
No,
already on.
it's not the
isn't it?
GRV, it's a quantum of estimated interim rate. So for instance, say in a year you had 40,000 properties in your city,
Yeah,
and next year you're going to have 40,400. The 400 would generate an additional rate component, and that's called interim rate. And the reason it's interim is that they mightn't all be created at the start of the year. A building, a strata unit with, say, 10 units on it, might be a single block, or it might be a single block in the year because it's halfway through construction. But sometime during the year, all of those 10 units are complete. So it goes from being a single rateable property to a green title or other title, and we get 10 individual rates. So they form part of the interim rate. It's like a growth function on the number of properties and therefore the amount of income. Now, long term, we know historically, certainly for the last 5 years, we've had a revenue stream of this of around $225,000. We're having a slightly higher interim rate next year, that's our estimate, by an extra $25,000. And that's based on some of the stimulus monies the federal government put into the economy. And Director Bride would say there, we've had more growth in these things. So we use his property planning area to estimate what that growth in interim rates is going to be.
so that's the city's estimation.
It's a city's estimate. And you'll find every year we have a line in there, every local government, called interim rates. Back at the City of Coburn, just as an example, we would hand interim rates there as a growth council of $1.5 million every year, and very consistent. Armidale, if Councillor Sabiri were here, would have had that at least, if not more, for the growth suburbs. Canning's got growth, but nowhere near that quantum.
Councillor Barry?
Yes, so on page 13.51, it says the advertised rates are indicative of maintaining the city's rating contributions and burden across the existing differential rate categories. Further rates modelling will be carried out during the 21-22 year and may vary the actual rate charges to be adopted. Now, that's during the 21-day submission period, I think it says there. So does that mean that the differential rate may change? Or...
Director Kane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we are doing tonight and presenting to you is proposed differential rates. The feedback we would get would be relate from the community. The other thing that will happen in this period of time is there will be some additional properties in. So what that item is saying is that, look, we'll expect that the final count of the number of properties we have might vary slightly from what we first put in. It won't change the differential rates, but it will change the total property count. And what you would have seen, for instance, if you looked at item 38 and broke it down, that also gave you the split between residential and commercial, just to show you too that what we estimate is that whilst there might be some differential rate movement in both commercial, overall both are moving around the same quantum. That's our estimate.
Okay, the last question is, now we're going to put this out for 21 days submission, and for argument's sake, if we get 10 or we get 200, what weight do we put on the submissions of the ratepayers, or is this just a moot question that we ask them? Because it
Director
really doesn't
Kane.
matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we advertised this last year, we had 51 submissions come through. So I'm suspecting we could at least end up the same quantum. Each submission's reported and bring back to council. And in terms of the weighting, that's a decision for council. What we are using, Mr. Mayor and council, is we are going to put all of these submissions back to the Your Say page. So the creation of that now is trying to encourage people to do it. So there's a full page ad ready to go, pending council's decision, a reference back to Your Say. And as part of that improvement of communications, we're keen to actually tell people in this budget or differential rate on the sorts of things we're proposing to council that your budget will deliver. So there's going to be a lot more information in this year than perhaps there last year.
Hang on, you said last question.
Well, can it be made crystal clear to the public? It's never going to be that, you know that.
Yeah, I know that, yeah. I don't know why you say it every week.
Will it be crystal clear to the public how they can make those submissions, either by post, by electronic, phone, or whatever?
Director?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the item is clear. And look, just in terms of transparency, it's not unusual for a local government to simply put a small advert in the back of the West Australian in the public notice. Little tiny 12-line thing saying, here's our differential rates. This city, and following the principle it did last year, puts a whole page advert or a half-page advert into the local newspaper. We put it on our website, it'll be put out, encouraging people to have their say. If someone drops something in by post, we'll capture it. If they ring up, our staff will take the phone call and record it. So we're not afraid of diminishing in that. In fact, we love people to go to the website and particularly see all the wonderful things that are going to be delivered by the City of Canning next year.
Your microphone.
Thank you. Just in closing, and the Minister said that today, I mean, what he wants and what the government wants is transparency and consultant. So if we do that, then we're doing the right thing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ponatore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question through you to Director Kane. Last year when we were doing it, I noticed that we are looking at option 2 and $55 mark we agreed, but you're giving us the property category in the point 11 I'm talking at the moment. Some of them will be proposed increase 74, 42, 50 and the average on the 55. So people are paying less, they will not worry, they'll be very happy. Are you able to tell us what percentage of the people will have to pay that $74 mark? I think last year, I remember Director Adams gave us like 1% of the people might pay that little extra amount when we did the differential rating. So did you do any of that work? See, we have 40,000 residential people paying, but what percentage of the people will be paying the one on the $74 mark? Are you able to tell us?
Director Kane, did you want to take that on notice?
Look, we can break that down when we have the response back from the advertising. I'm happy to give you that. The reality about any point around an average is 50% of the people pay less than that and 50% pay more than that. That's why it's going on as an average. If you've got 40,000 properties, for instance, we know 20,000 are going to pay more than that and 20,000 pay less. I don't know the proportional split around that. It will all depend upon the GRV of each of the houses. What we can say, though, is the numbers in here are entirely consistent with the model we gave back to you. And when you look at the differential rates, objects and reasons, we have cross-referenced in that every item that was part of that council decision for long-term financial plan.
Thank you.
Can I finish it? Okay. Because it was a special model was worked on this specifically because it makes us also easier to communicate with the people, because when people throw the question on us why the rate increased at this time. So 55, as I said, it's quite an easy amount, or 52 is $1 per week. Increase, it's easy to debate and talk to people and convince people to be paying that. But 75 is fairly high. There was a percentage, there's a special modeling was used here last year. So maybe if you can find out, that's part of this, it'll be important
Perhaps
to
you could
see.
find that,
Thank you. I appreciate that one. Thank
Take it on
you.
notice and send it through to the councillor. Thank you. Councillor Kunza.
Just for the sake of clarity, is Councillor Ponatore talking about when we were presented on when we put the concession in to make sure that no one paid more, which isn't relevant this year?
No, I don't think that's right. I'm pretty sure that's what we're talking about.
Sorry, can I
Director?
just, Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify?
Director?
I think I know what Councillor Ponatore is referring to in terms of if once we move the aggregate up, perhaps outside of the average, where do people, number of properties might sit in different bands of cost increase.
We'll dig that information up for you, Councillor Ponatore. I'll get it to you. No problem at all.
Just to clarify through Mr. Mayor.
I don't think you need to clarify. I think we've just had the question answered, so we're going to get the information to you.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to clarify to Councillor Kunza, that's what I'm trying to say, is exactly what I'm trying to work and how it's, yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank
Councillor Berry,
you.
did you have another question?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor, yeah, it was just in relation to that residential non-minimum and the average residential. Just as a differential, are does the rate increase that's adopted via that differential, does that include waste and security? And I know it wouldn't be FISA because that's nothing to do with us, but does that include waste and security? And I suppose the follow-up question to that, if that is not the case, and it's not, will they have a an increase in them.
Director
both.
Kane?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, the differential rates are just the differential rate movement. The modelling around the waste charge and the security charge is about finished. You might remember we brought a slide to you a few weeks ago as one of the presentations showing to you what the proposed movements were, or the estimated movements at that time. My intent, Mr Mayor, is this week, Friday, probably by Monday, we'll send separate slides to you on the movements of the calculation of the waste charge, calculation of the security charge. We've finished the fees and charges schedule, so we're going to send you a complete list of the fees and charges schedule as part of the information package.
You'll send that around to the
I'll send it around to
entire
all
council.
elected members.
Okay, within the next couple of days. Just your microphone again, please, councillor.
So fees and charges are part of the differential rates because they will be included in the rating structure as well.
Director Kane?
So fees and charges aren't included in this item for differential rates because that income is a separate stream. But the fees and charges, remember the workshop we went through, we said to you that we've done the benchmarking around certain fees and charges and categories we can move, the ones at full cost recovery, the ones that are discretionary and statutory, etc. So all of that work is complete. We gave you estimates at the time what they were going to move at. I'm going to get the schedule once it's been checked to be distributed to you probably by Monday, and I'll put some explanatory notes on the cover so that you're in a position to have a look at that. And Mr Mayor, with the notes, we'll be asking councillors to come back with any queries you have to us about each of those components.
Thanks, Director Kane. Thank you. Councillor Holland, there's no need to close, I think, unless somebody's got something else they need to say. Councillor Sweeney?
Director Kane, just listening tonight, I feel a little bit like I'm walking down Sideshow Alley at the Royal Show and you're the ringmaster with a big hook trying to hook everybody in here. I don't know whether that's the right analogy, but that's how I'm feeling. And you know, I'm somebody that likes options, and at the moment there's only one option on the table, even one option, but at the moment we've only got the one option. And I think I've been outspoken right from the beginning when you first arrived, when you looked into this, that I've been a critic of your plan. And that's because I really don't think that the ratepayers alone should be the ones that need to cough up for the mistakes the city has made.
Oh, hang on a sec. I'll stop you right there.
Well,
The city hasn't made mistakes. We've been through this. And it's not Mr Kane's plan. You make it sound like it's Mr Kane's personal plan. This is part of the long-term financial plan that we as a council adopted. We resolved this as a group. So whether you voted against it or not, you need to accept that it was a decision of council. All we're doing tonight is proposing just to advertise it and ask for public submissions. If people feel similarly to yourself that they oppose it, that's why Councillor Barry was asking questions about how we're advertising. Are we going to have any waiting for those submissions? What opportunity do people have to have their say on what we've proposed? But we all adopted this. It's not Mr Kane's personal plan.
can I speak now, Mr.
You can, but I've got to correct you, Craig, when you actually raise things that are just simply incorrect or assumptions.
Well, I think I'm factually correct, actually, because...
Well, I have to...
Director,
well, hang on, I'll stop you right there and say you're not factually correct because you actually said this is Mr Kane's plan. It's not Mr Kane's plan.
Well, he organised the workshops and he did the presentations along with his people from his department.
Let's move on. What's your question?
So, well, I haven't got a question.
Okay.
Not yet. I might have, but not yet. Anyway, Mr Kane...
Are you speaking against this or are you speaking for it? You need to start...
Oh,
so when you start
against
speaking,
it.
you need
I
to
already
say I'm
said
speaking
that.
against it.
I said
didn't hear that.
I've been a critic right from day one.
But that's not saying I'm speaking against
Well, I'll
this.
speak against it, Mr
Okay,
Mayor.
thank
If you're happy with that, I've just said, I'll speak against it. But in recapping, and I've just lost my train of thought now, but in recapping, you identified anomalies and discrepancies to get to where we are today. And where we are today is that, you know, there's been a significant blowout in our expenditure. I think that would be the correct way to put it, Mr Mayor.
Well, hang on a sec. I'll ask for a comment. Is this a blowout of our expenditure? Have you got any comment to make on...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You would be aware that through all the workshops we presented to you, we showed you where the expenditures had gone, but also where the lack of income came. And just to pick up a couple of points of the Mayor's observation, we presented at the special council meeting 3 options, and the option that we are following through tonight is one adopted by council. So in accordance with the standing orders, I would just point out that item 3 of the item that was presented to you last time specified the amounts that would be raised this year as the maximum for the rate increase. Item 6 says, applies the above measures to the City's draft financial year 21-22 annual budget and for the preparation of the rate setting statement. So having made that decision by Council, the staff are obliged to follow through and implement the decision of Council. So that's all we're doing tonight. We can't change it. If there was to be someone who wanted to change it, they needed to have moved a revocation notice to have that revoked as a decision, and that hasn't occurred. So from that point onwards, staff are obliged to continue to implement Council's decision, not my decision. There hasn't been, since we had the mid-year budget review, any substantive change to the City's operating position. Each month we've come back to you, we've shown you what the monthly figures are. At no stage have I said we've had all this additional expenditure. That's not the case. The operating position presented to you at the March budget is pretty much how we're tracking now. There is only one thing that could change that, and that is the decision of Council. So on Tuesday night, you Council considered the issue for the Willetton Basketball Association and a loan, 225,000, 50,000. Now that amount is not in this year's budget. So if a decision of Council is made to provide that loan, it will increase the budget deficit, which will increase the carry forward. But again, that's not a decision of staff, it'll be a decision of Council. Other than that, Mr Mayor and Councillor, there is no variation or major change in any of the expenditure.
Yeah, I was just saying from where we were at December to when you arrived, and the blowout from, I think it was 1.5 in December, to what you discovered was a blowout from that 1.5. But I'll move on because I think, we have to. I just want to cut to the chase, really. And that is that the plan that we're looking at the moment is the one that I have a problem with because there's only one plan. And it really evolves around the focus of hiking up the rates with no other options except hiking up the rates. So I do have a problem with that. So I think tonight, for me, it's one of two things, councillors. If you think that we're on the right track, and if you think that we have to fix this by the one plan of hiking up the rates, and that's the right thing to do by all your ratepayers, then vote this through. But if you are like me and would like another option, another plan that might look at something else, because there's still plenty of time, and if you think that's the right thing to do and not hike up the rates but look at another plan that perhaps looks at a couple of other options where we can reduce the burden on the ratepayers and not just straight away hit the ratepayers. So that's what it's about. Tonight, if you think it's the right thing to do and you back that and you want to just hike up the rates and that alone, then vote this through. If you don't, you want to have a look at one more option.
Councillor Sweeney, I have to call a point of order here under section 8.2, and it's under relevance at 7.10 of the standing orders. We're not hiking up rates here. You are simply being asked to consider whether this rate be advertised for public submission and for public feedback. That is it. The decision of council tonight is not to, in your words, hike up rates. That is not what we are doing tonight. You have either misinterpreted what's happened or you are not clearly understanding what is actually happening, but that is not happening. So it is not relevant to tonight. That's not what's happening here. Now, you asked before about options. It was explained to you and you raised it again. You've only got one option in front of you. Director Kane a moment ago said to you the council was presented with three options. This is the option that council chose. So I'm just finding what you're saying irrelevant. So I'll ask you to please close and move on or speak to the matter relevantly, please.
Well, I guess we disagree on that because I do think...
Councillor Sweeney, I need to stop you right there. I've made a ruling and I've asked you to move on. I don't need you to speak to me disrespectfully and say, well, we'll have to disagree or whatever you want to say. I've made a ruling. I'm asking you to move on and please be relevant to the matter in front of you, which is that we are asking council to approve the following differential rate and minimum rates for advertising. That's all that's being asked here.
Yeah, I understand that.
I'm not certain that you actually do.
Well, I do. It's very, very thorough for me. It's very, very clear. I know exactly what we're doing here.
Councillor Barry.
Well, to a certain degree, and I'll assume that Councillor Sweeney's finished talking.
I'm not sure if he has. Are you asking a
I
question?
will ask you. I mean, I don't want to talk over because he has the floor, even though he's not standing.
Well, he had until you stood
I don't
up.
know. Do I have the floor?
Well, yeah.
You do have the floor. Councillor Sweeney, have you stopped, you finished talking on
Have you
this?
finished? Sorry.
I'll let Councillor Barry talk.
No, okay, thank you. Councillor Barry?
So, no questions. Basically, I'll be speaking for the motion to the extent that it's going to the public for submissions. And this might be of value to Councillor Sweeney. I don't know one way or the other or not. This is about a rate in the dollar. I think the last one we accepted the long-term financial plan. That's the long-term financial plan. Now, I don't think this really has that much to do with it to the extent because we are putting it to the people. If we have submissions, if we don't, it'll come back and there will be, in that 21 days, there will be a draft budget that will be formulated. And then we will have a chance as councillors, I believe, that we can change it one way or the other. I'm sympathetic to what the councillor says, but long-term financial plans, and I've said this and I've been castigated on it before, they are aspirational, they are not set in stone because we know that for a fact because COVID made an absolute monkey out of the last one. So this is basically to say to the people, whether we believe it's a hike or not, it's the opportunity for them to come back to the council with their submission, and then the draft budget will come into play between Director Kane, Mr. Atwala. That will be our opportunity to say what you like. And I'm sympathetic to the course to a certain extent, so maybe that's what I've got to say, and I hope that may have some meaning to you as well. Thank
you, Councillor Barry. Councillor Ponaturai.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a very quick question through you to Director Kane. I was just looking at the Canningvale specific area rate. They were saying there is a proposed of $3% higher compared to 2021, but this proposed increase still will leave an estimated deficit of 6,306 end of June 2022. But I couldn't add that figure 67,030, and so is any reason the 6,300 balance, where does it come, Director Kane?
Director Kane.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's an estimate based on the expenditure likely to go out of that account. So with the special area rate, it's intended to recover all of the costs of maintaining the Canningvale area. But the amount that was raised is insufficient to pay for all of the maintenance.
Just your microphone.
So even
sorry, the 3% also still insufficient, you're saying?
Yeah, we still won't, but we're not proposing to raise it more than that this year. We'll run an operating deficit on that account and for about 6,000, and then the following year seek to do the variation required in the special area rate to fully recover the cost.
And just a quick question on that. Are we sure that we will manage? It's only 6,000, won't go higher? I mean, 6,000 is a very negligible amount that we can manage, but are you comfortable that it won't go higher than that? I'm happy.
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's our best estimate based on the expenditure rates going out through Mr. Bowe's area right now and through finance. Councillor, as I say, trying to be precise on something like that, on a small sum, it's hard indeed.
Thanks, Councillor Ponaturai. Councillor Jacobs, and then I might invite Councillor Holland to finish. Oh, okay, Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, sorry.
Thank you. Just a few quick questions. We've done the long-term financial plan. This is differential ratings. It goes out for consultation. We've got budget workshop after this. So Director Kane, is the the budget would be yet to be finalised. Would that be my understanding? Would my understanding be correct?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, that's correct. Obviously, what we do is present the list of capital works we're proposing consistent with that plan. It might be council came back and added some more capital works, but as you understand, it's a deficit budget, as we'll explain when we go through it. If council adds something, it simply increases the deficit. The other thing that we're trying to do at the moment is finalise all the operating expenditure. There are still accounts going through. For instance, I'll give you an example on one. We're just trying to work out with the litigation around a certain leisureplex we had. And we're allowing for so much more of additional cost for that for next year, but waiting for the lawyers to come back and finalise that. So all of those things going in will give us a final best estimate of deficit position.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr Mayor.
Yep, of course.
So going from that, if some councillors had some concerns on the budget burden to ratepayers, would my understanding be correct that perhaps that could be discussed during our budget workshops, and perhaps if we make a final decision on the budget, that would be the timing to say, okay, we need to cut some things, or is that my understanding would be correct there, would it, Mr Director?
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, look, ultimately the workshops are still a work in progress, if I use that. What we're intending to do is, for instance, sending out the calculations around security levies, waste levies, etc., and even tonight's workshop, ask for feedback to come back by the 1st of June. We'll consolidate the complete budget and have another workshop with you on 10th of June. At that stage, you'll understand just exactly how big the deficit is going to be for next year. And by then we'll also had some reasonable feedback, I suspect, on differential rates, even though we won't have finished the advertising period.
Thank you. Councillor Barry.
Just further on from what the Deputy Mayor has said, I mean, I hope I'm interpreting that correctly, and I'll ask the question because there may be some considerations for councillors within the budget to follow in relation to the differential rating. I just lost my train of thought then. No, I haven't. It gets to the stage where, I mean, I know I think it's 6.21 of the Act where it says you can, within 2 months of your next financial year, put out differential ratings. That's correct, I know. And I think it's 6.363, which says your budget you can do from June 1 until August 31st. And if you go over August 31, you have to ask the Minister for an extension. That is correct as I read it, and I hope you agree with me. But then is it also true that then we have, depending on the queries of councillors, that we have until August 31st to ask all those questions, whether we want a different option, a different budget? I mean, it's up to the council, I know, but is that correct or not? Thank you.
Director, just quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. The Act allows the budget to be adopted up to 31st of August, as you say. The intent is to encourage local governments to adopt their budget before the end of the financial year, so you're not then spending money that you don't know what you've got. The problem is if you don't adopt a budget by 1st of July, you're spending money that you really don't know that what the final position is going to be. The other thing, of course, in adopting a budget after the 30th of June is you're using this year's cash. So at what stage, as we showed you the liquidity graph earlier, at what stage do you potentially run out of cash, and the longer you go beyond that point? That's why the Minister has a cut-off in there, so that councils can't simply defer the budget forever and literally run out of cash, which isn't something we want anyone to do.
Well, just further to that, another question is that, I mean, I'm aware of all that sort of stuff, but I mean, I think as Councillor Ponaturi asked, and it was answered sort of, in a way, if we're not aware as yet of all the costs that are going to be entailed in the budget and the differential rating as such, then to be fully informed, then we have to know that. I mean, all figures should be in. I think in one document, I may be wrong, but please correct me if I am, it said, you know, we might have to wait till September, I think, for carryovers. Well, that just doesn't seem right. I would have thought that the city had the ability to bring that in a little bit
Yes,
quicker,
yeah,
but
thank you.
please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In terms of carry forward projects, that's fairly normal for local governments. They don't have the final carry forward project figure finished until September. That allows, after 30th of June, invoices which are still taken up at a year to come through. Every local government, and including ours, will make an estimate of the carry forward position as at 30th, or what they expect to be 30th of June. That won't affect the budget position. So it's essential that the budget's not dependent on the carry forward position. In our case, the budget this year, we can say 100% categorically to you, will be another deficit budget. The question will be is how much of a deficit it's going to be. We are working to the principle that the deficit should be as close as possible to the figures we put to you in the long-term financial plan option 2 when you adopted that. So we're not trying to have a deficit bigger than that figure. But as I said, if council make a decision regarding the Willetton Basketball Association, that's going to change that position. We just don't know what that decision will be until it comes back to council next month. Now that decision will be made after we've had another budget workshop. So we're going to take an estimate. We think you'll probably make that decision and put that cost in now. We will give our very best on all of the costs that go into this as part of the budget process.
Thank you. Councillor Kunza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I just want to, given the, I guess, the characterisation of rate hike and so forth, just briefly comment. When we talked about the long-term financial plan a week and a half ago, I spoke about the statistics or the information that we'd previously been provided with, like comparisons of different local governments. And in terms of how much rate increases since 2001 to 2019, and that one of our neighbours had increased their rates by 125% during that period. They're now looking at a 6.7% rate increase. Obviously, we had no rate increase last year, so a 4.65 is basically over a 2-year period. I don't consider that a massive rate hike. Nobody wants to increase rates, but during that period, we were the second lowest increase over that period, which was 65%, with the average across Perth being 83%. So I see one of our issues in terms of whether mistakes or anything, was that potentially keeping rates so low, compromised our capacity to provide those services that the community wants. And so that's what we're having to look at to resolve right now. My experience in the presentations over the last 5 years is that we haven't been funding certain things appropriately. And I mean, as I said last week, how often do people say that they want certain things that we can't provide? So I don't see this as a massive rate hike. It's lower than some local governments who have put up rates considerably more than us over the last 20 years. I think it's fair and reasonable. And again, given that this is basically a budget over 2 years with no increase last year, I don't see it characterised as a massive rate hike. I look forward to seeing what the public thinks about this once we put it to advertising and go through this budget cycle, but I don't think it's should be characterised in such a doom and gloom outlook. Thank you.
Councillor Holland, I might invite you to close debate. If you move the motion, so we've only had one. We've only had one person.
It's a question mark. I've got a question.
Oh, okay, sorry, go on. I'm seeing it in reverse, see, I'm seeing it like that. Yeah. Ask your question. Go ahead, Councillor Holland.
Yeah, and I think Councillor Pond, sorry for raising what you did about this, the SAR before, because I actually meant to raise it and I forgot, to be quite honest. And what concerns me here is that we're $6,000 odd in the red. Now it's supposed to come through a dedicated reserve fund account. And now if we're going to be $6,000 in the red, you're asking the rest of the City of Canning to subsidise it.
Director,
the special area rate. And I don't quite understand why we would do that.
Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not personally asking the rest of Canning to subsidise it. There's an operating deficit on that account now, and effectively the way we cover that is we have a shortfall, because any funds that are into that fund go into the reserve, draw down. We have a shortfall in reserve. We could, if you want, councillor, increase the special area rate so there is no net deficit on that. But by putting it up 3%, we believe it will cover most of the operating deficit we have from this year, fully cover the cost of the delivery of the service here. We're saying we think it will probably be about $6,000 short. Pick up a point Councillor Barry made, in terms of increased transparency, when you look at our object and differential statement this year, I've included commentary around special area rate. That hasn't been in our objects and reasons in the past. So we're trying to give the public as much knowledge of these things as possible. We don't actually have to advertise under the Act the special area rate, but we are choosing to advertise that to give the public. Now, it is open to council to come back when we do the final calculation, Councillor Holland, and say, all right, the special area rate for Canning Vale should be moved up by 0.0001, so there's actually no deficit, but that will be a decision for council.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Look, part of that, most of that wasn't the answer to my question whatsoever. Whether we advertise and making it transparent, that wasn't the question at all. The question was that the rest of the City of Canning is going to subsidise a special area rate if there's $6,000 in the deficit. That's got to be what it means. Am I wrong? Or yes or no?
Just a yes or no. Or keep it brief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We believe there'll be a deficit of $6,000. Effectively, if you want to say it's a subsidy, yes, but it's not a subsidy because it's a debt that sits in the reserve. So the residents of Canning still owe the $6,000 to come back and pay for it. They don't end up with a subsidy. And as I said, Councillor, the intent would be then the following year to raise it again, so there is no deficit if that's the case.
Like I've always said, I'm not an accountant, but I don't understand that at all.
Did you want to take it off? Sorry.
No, well, I don't mind taking it offline, but that is something that can be discussed at budget meetings, that rate, if you want to increase it by 0.00, whatever, we can do that? Yes. Okay, well then I'll be happy with that.
Okay.
And
did you want to
just closing, there's nothing further I have to add,
okay.
Mr. Mayor.
That being the case, councillors, let's put the matter to the vote.
Item CC-0-21, proposed differential rating for 21-22, was carried. 9 in favour, 1 against. That against being Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, councillors. At item 7, confidential matters, there are none this evening. At item 8, closure, there be no further business for this special council meeting. I now declare the meeting closed and the time at 6:47 p.m. Thank you to everyone for attending.